Last year, when the leaves started to change colors and fall to the ground, I decided to go camping in the big forest area right behind where I live. My house is in the countryside, close to some big mountains, so I've always loved doing outdoor stuff like camping, walking in the forest, and catching fish. I didn't really have a clear idea about what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to walk on a trail about the length of 4 miles to reach a spot where I could put up my tent and stay for a couple of days, maybe 2 days or maybe even 5, depending on how I felt. One morning I got up super early, even before it was light outside. I started walking, and by the time the sun was right overhead, around lunchtime, I found a good place. I put up my tent there and made everything cozy and nice. After that, I remembered my fishing rod, so I decided to walk a short distance to a small lake nearby to see if I could catch some fish. I've always believed that this place was my little secret. It's far from all the popular spots where people usually go in the mountains. The best part? It's so close to my home. This means whenever I feel like it, I can just grab my stuff and head out. In all the years I've been coming here, I've never bumped into anyone or seen any signs that someone had been there before me. That's why it was really strange when out of nowhere, I heard a voice. I was standing next to the lake, trying to catch some fish, when I heard shouting. It sounded like it was coming from the forest, on the other side from where my tent was. If you've never been in the mountains, you might not know that sounds can be really tricky there. The mountains can make sounds echo, and trees and water can change the way a sound seems. Because of all this, it's hard to know how far away a sound is coming from. The shouting voice sounded like it was nearby, but I couldn't make out the words. I thought maybe it was coming from far away and just seemed close. I wondered if maybe there was a group of friends playing around in the distance. Still, it felt weird to hear someone so loudly in a place where I'd never seen or heard anyone before. After spending around an hour by the lake and catching a few good-sized fish, I went back to my campsite. As the sky turned orange and pink, I made a small fire. I was just about to start cooking the fish when, in the quiet of the evening, that same voice called out again, somewhere in the shadows of the trees. When the night was all around me, I heard the voice again. It was louder now, like it was coming from just outside the circle of trees around my campsite. The night was so dark I couldn't even see past a couple of trees. The only thing I knew was that it was a young guy's voice, and now it sounded like he was in pain. He shouted again, asking if anyone was nearby. I could hear fear and desperation in his voice that sent a chill down my spine. My first thought was that he was someone who had gotten lost and was in some sort of trouble. Wanting to help, I quickly picked up my backpack and a flashlight and headed in the direction of the voice. But as I got closer, something told me to be careful. I decided to dim my flashlight so it wouldn't shine too brightly, and tried to move silently. But then, I heard footsteps on the grassy ground coming towards me. They got louder and louder until they stopped suddenly. Then, the voice shouted out once more. Trying to see where he was, I slowly moved the flashlight around. Suddenly, I shone the light directly on a man standing just a short distance from me. We were so close that I could see his face clearly. He was staring right at me, but he wasn't saying anything. A few long seconds went by. Finally, I broke the silence, asking, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" But he didn't answer. He just kept looking at me, not moving at all. I felt a rush of fear, like a cold wind blow through me. Something felt very wrong. Without waiting for anything else, I turned around and ran as fast as I could back to my camp. Without wasting any time, I quickly pulled down my tent and packed everything up. All the while, I kept my flashlight pointed at the trees, half expecting to see the man following me. I didn't stop running until I reached my house. My foot twisted a couple of times and I tripped and fell more than once. My whole body was shaking, Not just from the cold, but from fear, too. Whoever that man was, it didn't seem like he wanted help. It felt more like he was trying to trick me. That experience scared me so much that I decided I wouldn't go camping in that spot ever again. Even now, thinking about it makes me shiver. I live in a flat close to a big town. There are 8 of these flats, but only 5 have people living in them. The rest are empty. This area used to be busier, but many folks have left over time. It feels kind of lonely. If I moved closer to the town, I'd have to pay a lot more money to stay there. So I'm here for now. It's okay living here. It's not amazing, but it's not bad either. Some time back, I came home after work. I did the things I do every night and went to sleep. That night I kept waking up because I heard weird noises from the flat above mine. I heard things like soft hits, strange sounds, and sometimes the sound of someone walking. I had no idea who was in the flat above me. I had never heard any sounds from there before. The next day I was super tired at work because I hadn't slept well. I kept wondering about the sounds. When I came home that evening, I listened carefully to see if I heard anything again, but the night was quiet until the middle of the night. I woke up to the same kind of noise, but this time it felt louder and closer. I got out of bed and went to the main room. The noise was coming from the corridor outside my door. I checked through the little hole in my door, but I could only see the door of the flat in front of mine. Then I heard the sound of someone walking, getting fainter. It sounded like they were walking up the stairs. And then I heard a door close loudly. Curious, I opened my door a bit to see what was happening outside. I looked out and the hallway was empty. Still, knowing that someone was there late at night and making those weird sounds scared me a bit. I quickly shut and locked my door. I couldn't sleep right away, so I stayed awake for a little while. When I finally felt sleepy and got into bed, it didn't last long. A loud knock on my door woke me up. Carefully, I got up and tiptoed to my door to see who it was. Through the tiny hole in the door, I saw a guy staring at my door. He had his hands in his coat pockets. He knocked really loudly again and then tried to open the door by shaking the handle. He seemed nervous, looking around the hallway and then talking quietly to someone I couldn't see. At that moment, I realized that something was really wrong. I tried not to make a noise as I grabbed my phone. I called the police, and while I was talking to them, the loud knocking started again. Then I heard the sound of 2 people running up the stairs. The sound came from the flat right above me. It got really quiet after that. I waited until the police came. I told them what happened, and where I thought the guys went. The police went to the flat above and found it was empty. But when they looked in the closet, they found 2 men hiding there. The room was messy with garbage everywhere. The men told the police they broke into the flat because they didn't have a place to stay. But they didn't say anything about the noises at night or why they knocked on my door that way. The police took them away. I don't think they got a big punishment because they were just homeless and hadn't really hurt anyone. Still, that night scared me so much. Even if they didn't tell the police anything, I can't help but wonder what they were really doing in that flat above mine. I think they had some scary plans. I've been at this gas station job for quite a while now, a good 3 years actually. And in that time, I've come across a lot of weird folks and strange happenings. Some of my coworkers who work at other gas stations have way scarier stories, but for me, things had always been pretty normal. But then, something different happened earlier this year. It was just another regular evening, with me behind the counter, looking forward to the end of my shift. The gas station I work at is right in the heart of this tiny town. Most nights, we don't get many customers after dark. I remember that night. I was just staring out of the window, not really thinking about anything when suddenly the phone rang. I wasn't in a hurry to answer it, to be honest. But when I did, it was weird. No one said anything. There wasn't any of that typical background noise you hear sometimes, like someone giggling because they're pulling a prank. It was just nothing. Just a sort of silent noise. For some weird reason, I found myself really curious about the call. I guess I had nothing better to do. But after waiting a while and hearing nothing, I just hung up. For a moment I considered calling back, thinking maybe someone genuinely wanted to speak, but then I thought if it's important, they'll ring again. Time passed, and I kind of forgot about that odd call. I got back to my usual pastime of watching the empty street through the window. Even though we're in the center of the town, it gets really, really dark by 1 a.m. The only lights you can see are the street lamps, and everything beyond them is just lost in the darkness. Suddenly, the door's bell chimed, snapping me back to reality. A guy walked in, heading straight to the section where we keep the liquor. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with a dark blue sweatshirt on. There was something about his face. He looked exhausted, like he'd had a really long day or maybe even a string of them. I noticed he seemed a bit indecisive, moving from one shelf to another, probably trying to pick a drink. For the first few minutes I kept an eye on him, just to be sure he was all right. But after a while I got distracted. Once again my attention drifted to the window. Weirdly, even though this guy had walked in, I didn't notice any cars parked outside. So I noticed that the man didn't come in a car, which struck me as odd. I mean, it's super late and really dark out. Why would someone be walking around? As I turned my head back to see where he'd gone, he wasn't anywhere in sight. I squinted, trying to find him among the aisles, thinking maybe I'd missed him. But there was no sign. I felt a tinge of worry, thinking maybe he'd fallen or needed help. Hesitantly, I walked around from behind the counter and started to go through each aisle, wondering if he'd somehow collapsed. But nope, he wasn't there. I even peeked into the bathroom, but it was empty. I called out, "Hey, mister, you okay?" But there was just silence. Feeling a bit freaked out, I returned to my spot behind the counter, trying to shake off the weird feeling. I mean, it was late. The door always made a sound when someone came in or left, and I was sure I hadn't heard it. Thinking I was probably too tired and maybe seeing things, I took an energy drink from a nearby shelf and began sipping it. A few cars zoomed by outside, but no one else came in. To distract myself, I pulled out my phone and started watching some funny videos. But then, out of nowhere, I heard a sound right in front of me. My heart skipped a beat when I saw that same man walking out of the store. I watched, totally stunned, as he moved away from the gas station, vanishing into the darkness. I was super shaken up for the rest of my shift. When the store's owner came in early in the morning, I immediately told him what happened. He said he'd check on it, but later told me nothing was out of place. The security tapes were hard to access, and he didn't see the point in checking them since nothing seemed to be stolen. What creeped me out the most was that the guy didn't take anything. He'd just appeared, vanished, then left again without a word. When I talked to my boss a few days later, I urged him to take a look at the security tapes, but he dismissed my concerns. That was the final straw for me. I quit not long after, getting a job at another gas station on the other side of town. I still wonder about that night. Who was that guy? What was he doing? And why did he just vanish like that? Part of me hopes I'll never find out,